Alright guys, it's Ross and we're here at the third part of the fig tour, a different section of the figs. And my friend Danny, in his yard, he likes to name each section of his yard that has figs in it. He lives in New York City, so he'll name it after different parts of New York City. So I love that idea, but I can't really think of anything right now, so maybe you guys can, or we can talk about it later. But let's get into this section here. And this section for now, I guess I'm going to nickname just the younger trees. These are just much younger trees that are in these smaller pots here, guys. I really need to get them out of this size. I may at some point get rid of some of these guys or find a home for some of them. For the time being, they're all keepers. I can always graft new varieties onto them, experiment that way with them. But they're a lot of work to maintain in this small pot size. I'd much rather have fewer trees in larger containers. So anything over a 10 gallon seems worth it, and the production's higher. So they also seem much easier to get going, in the 10 gallon size. So like if they're fully rooted out in a 10 gallon size pot, the beginning of that season, they seem to just do better than a smaller size pot. They put out new growth quicker, and the more growth you get, the earlier in the season, the more figs you can potentially get. So I don't know. I just think figs are meant to be grown in they're meant to be grown in the ground, but they're meant to be grown in a much larger size pot than the 5 gallon size. So at some point here in the coming weeks, I really should get these guys in larger size pots, but I first have to locate some bigger size pots. So that's kind of what I'm waiting for. But yeah, let's get on to the varieties here. This one I've talked about quite a bit in passing. This is Frigola Nera, and Frigola Nera seems to be a Smyrna type. And the reason I say this is because I had 5 Breba that dropped, I think due to water. I think due to a lack of water. I also had 12 main crop that dropped, most of which dropped before I left for Japan, and then when I came back, there was nothing left. So I couldn't even find signs of the figs that have dropped, so maybe they did ripen. Maybe there is hope. It did put out now its 3rd crop of the season. Astoundingly enough, this is the 3rd crop, the 2nd main crop, and maybe one of these guys will ripen. I don't know. But so far it's looking grim, and it was looking very positive because of how much growth this tree puts out, how many figs it was putting out. I was quite astounded, but you never know with some of these Italian varieties, guys. Here's Gillette. Gillette I'm using as rootstock, but the rootstock kind of died back, so I couldn't graft anything onto it. So we're letting it grow out this year, and I pinched it to see maybe if I could taste one of these tasteless figs. These cardboard tasting figs is what Gillette is, guys. It's an edible Capri fig, so it really isn't meant to be eaten, I think. It's a unique, interesting fig, but not something that I think we ought to be eating. This here is just a tree that I grafted. I think I'm going to skip those and just talk about the varieties that have green on them, just to kind of speed this up, because there's easily like 100 varieties right here. This here is my Dal Osso Belfiore that I grafted, and we had one that we talked about in part 2 in the end there. I grafted another limb of this, and we also bud grafted down here. Since this one was such a success, I wanted to see if I could add another variety to this tree through the form of bud grafting. So that's what we did under here, is we grafted Negretta. This here is Calderwood, and this is very similar, if not the same, as LSU Tiger. That's what we believe. I certainly agree. It's very productive. It's more productive than most trees I have. I mean, there's some trees that are later ripening that are in 10-gallon size pots over here, guys, that didn't put out nearly as many figs as this tree here. So this one to me is a keeper. LSU Tiger, definitely a keeper. We also had an LSU Tiger sucker that we dug up. You can see this is that sucker that we dug up. I did a separate video on digging up suckers, and this was one of the suckers I dug up, and it's massive now. It's like a full-fledged tree, putting out quite a bit of figs. I was shocked, to be honest with you. I think it's because LSU Tiger or Calderwood unknown. I mean, why are we even calling it Calderwood? It's LSU Tiger, right? But I guess I'll wait to see the fruit to confirm. But anyway, I think the leaves are just so massive that it just can turn from a really small tree to a huge tree in no time at all. I mean, it's so vigorous because of these massive photosynthesis receptors that they have. Very ornamental tree. Overall, just a huge winner here. This tree here is, what is this? What did I graft onto this? This is Hative de Argentile. So we grafted this variety here, guys. You can see down there's the graft being staked up. Give it some added protection, and we then pinched it to see if we could get a fig off of this young graft. And it didn't put out fruit, but it put out lots of branches, and it's growing very well. I'm very excited. What I wanted to do by grafting this was to see if I could decrease the fruit drop. Hative de Argentile seems to drop fruit at a young age, is what a lot of people say, and they say the reason for that is because of the root system. So if I graft this on a strong root system, will it still drop figs at a young age? We're going to find out. This over here is another tree that I was going to graft, and it took a hit in the greenhouse, and now it's putting out figs. I don't know what it is, though. I never kept track of the label because I think I lost it, but I was intending to use it as rootstock anyway, so it doesn't really matter. This here is GM 175. One of them GM figs, guys, that is going to be a real winner. You can see that there's massive production in here off this young tree. It grew really well for me last year, and then this year it put out a lot of figs in the greenhouse, and it set the tree back a little bit. It got a little shock, I think, when I took it outside of the greenhouse, put it in that cool May weather, and it didn't really do much for a while, but it eventually put out those figs and then started growing now. So very excited that this thing is taking off and we get to try a bunch of them, because it's going to be a really tasty variety here, guys. This here is Marala MP, and on Marala MP is a fig that fell off. So I think this is due to the heat that we've had, maybe a little bit of water, maybe a lack of water. I doubt it. I think it has a lot to do with the heat, but you know, we only have one fig left. So actually there's a few more forming here, but this is a Pons variety. When I say MP, that means Montserrat Pons. That's his initials, from Majorca. Looks like a tasty variety. We'll see. There's no one really out there that has any information on this variety. I mean, you can ask around and no one really will tell you anything. So people have it, though. It's not like people don't have it. They just don't talk about it. This fig here is Figoin. This is another Figoin tree that I have, or Verdino del Nord. I have a different Verdino del Nord. So this is the small fig, the Italian variety that I was talking about in the first fig tour that I did. and it has the ability to dry on the tree. It's quite early, quite productive. But we also have another Verdino del Nord that I want to show you guys from a different source. This is from Tatiana in Italy, and this one's putting out lots of figs for me. It's quite productive, it seems like, in the greenhouse, though. I don't know how well it would have done outside the greenhouse. It grew really well with those high temperatures in the greenhouse somehow, and put out a lot of figs. And I think it's kind of stalled up right now because there's so many figs on it for this young tree that we're kind of waiting for it to put out some growth. That'd be nice. I just took off that growth because when you pinch your figs, sometimes the topmost bud that comes out in a weird way. It usually comes out on like an angle, so I'd rather have this bud back here. You can see it back here. I'd rather have that grow out straight rather than have to deal with a weirdly shaped limb. But we'll see what happens with this. It's going to be a very tasty variety, I think. It's supposed to be very jammy, is what it's been described as. Totally different from my other Verdino del Nord. It's not the same, guys. I know there was some people that thought that they may be the same, and I think there's a few Verdino del Nords floating out around, and one of them's got to be better than the other one, and I have a feeling it's not this one. So, but I think they're both going to be pretty good figs, so we'll see what happens. This here is Lampira Prush, and Lampira from Prush Park. You can go and taste this fig in about a month from now at Prush Park in California. So this one grows at that park along with a number of other trees, and this is originally from that tree. Pretty cool, right? This here is, who's this guy? This is Nalaga. And Nalaga is a black fig that Wills in Florida really likes. It seems to be reliable for him there in Florida, and it holds up to the moisture well. So far, I got a taste off of it last year, and it resembled a little bit of RDB, but this year it doesn't look anything like RDB, so I don't know what this is. I'm really lost. It may just be unique, but it seems like it didn't put out anything this year, oddly enough. I wish it had, but I guess it's not too terrible that this thing is just growing and doing its own thing. You can see it's getting a nice form. Although this branch down here is slightly weird, but it is what it is. This thing here is a Col de Dame. Col de Dame, which one is this? The many Col de Dame. This is a Col de Dame Blanc. And it's putting out some figs, but again, it needs a long season. Right? So, not a fig that is easy to fruit, especially young and immature. Really needs to mature up, get some size on it. Needs a long season, lots of heat early on in the season, and you'll have figs. But otherwise, you get very little, but they're very, very tasty. They have a uniqueness to them. This here is a tree called Gallo. We just grafted this. Very excited for this little fig. It's not the biggest fig, but guess what? I think it's going to pack a punch. It kind of, the leaves remind me of Figoin, oddly enough. And it kind of is growing like it as well, but who knows? That's just a hunch. We also grafted Bicane on here, and it hasn't taken yet. It may never take. Well, it has taken. So if you look here at the graft union, this isn't going anywhere. There's no rubber band on here. It's solidified in here. If I can keep this bud alive until next year, this thing will leaf out. It'll send out a new bud here. It's just for whatever reason the tree doesn't want to send out something here. So I took it upon myself and grafted another variety down here as a bud graft, and we'll see if something down lower takes, and It may just be a little bit of time before we get something off that. This is my white Triana. I love this tree. Very similar to Canadria, similar to Atriano. I talked a lot about this fig. It's quite productive, and we actually had lots of growth on this tree earlier in the season, and I chopped it all off and decided to graft 2 hardy Chicago types to it. It's kind of an experiment, and so far they haven't taken. So upsetting that I lost all that growth for what could be nothing, but and all those figs what could be nothing, but I think it'll be worth it in the end, and we'll see. This here is a tree that is not really all that productive for its size, I think, but in the greenhouse I think it struggled a little bit. What is this damn thing? Bibera Branca. Okay, so Bibera Branca did really well in the greenhouse. It actually has some scale on it. You can see the scale there. I need to take that off. But Bibera Branca did really well in the greenhouse, put out figs for me that would have probably ripened now. And then I put it outside, and a couple of these trees didn't respond well to that cooler temperatures. So it dropped a lot of them, and then took a while to get going, and took a while to grow, and then finally it started growing, and it put out more figs. So I guess it's all right. Decent story for the season, This here is Medieval Yavor, unknown. My friend Devin gave me this tree. Actually, I think I bought it from him. This is a interesting looking green fig that he found in France, and he found another variety as well in France that I'm growing. Large purple. Where are you, large purple? It's somewhere in here, guys. Here it is. This is large purple, and you can see there's a fig growing on in there. And last year, Medieval Yavor grew a ton. Large purple put out a lot of figs, but they all dropped. Or actually, it put out a few figs. It seems like the large purple's really great at putting out figs, but it dropped. So potential Smyrna, I'm not sure. This here, Medieval Yavor, I haven't gotten this to fruit, and it grew like mad, but I almost killed it in the greenhouse. I'm really lucky because it actually came back from the base and is doing all right now. We pinched it to induce some branching here, so hopefully we'll get some good growth this year. This here is my Izmir bud graft that I did. You can see both of those bud grafts on in there. Not bad for some of the first bud grafting I had ever done. We also have another Izmir tree down here, which I got from a friend as a grafted tree. You can see it's fruiting there. Izmir is one of them varieties, guys, I think is going to be a hit. We also have Emmeline's Purple, which is getting a lot of traction, and it's a very sweet fig, so I'm excited for that. I love sweet. Here is my Simon Unknown #1. He has a couple unknowns, my friend Simon from Iraq, his family there. And these are in northern Iraq, a very cold part of Iraq, and this one I believe to be a Palmata hybrid. I'm almost certain of it. It produces 2 figs on every node. It's quite cold hardy, believe it or not. And it has an unusual growth habit. It has the leaves of a Palmata hybrid, the furry stems, and I don't know, we'll see. This here is Black Donov. I got from my friend in England, Vinny, if you're watching. This is the graft that I did, my friend, and it's taken off. It grows a lot. I also grafted Floria onto it, because if you go to Kirill Donov's website, he says that Black Donov has Floria, or Mitchurinska 10 is another name for Floria. He says that that fig is in Black Donov's parentage. It's a seedling, apparently. And so far, to me, it looks a lot like RDB. At least the leaf structure looks a lot like RDB. Who knows? There's a fig down there. But I'm excited regardless. If it does turn out to be RDB, it's not bad having another RDB. So this is Verdesca we grafted, and also Barile, but Verdesca is the one that took so far, and those are two figs that Paulo Baloney recommends for short season climates. Here we have White Marseille. It goes by many, many names. This fig is not very good. I'm not a huge fan of it. Why do I have it? Well, because I think I could get this fig to dry on the tree. If I can get this to dry on the tree, the skin maybe will be an asset. It has a very thick, bitter skin that really is not pleasant to eat. The inside doesn't make up for the skin. So if I can let it use the skin as an asset because of how thick it is and how tough it is and how it doesn't crack, doesn't split, it may actually have the ability to dry on the tree. So that's what I've been thinking, and that's why I kept it around. But it hasn't fruited for me this year, so if it doesn't fruit, I'm gonna get rid of it probably, or I'll put it in the ground because it's quite hardy. It's quite early. It sends up lots of suckers, so I'll have no problem keeping it alive. Here's a Franken fig that we grafted, and these are all GM figs, and we had a GM 149 on this limb here that was massive, just as big as this limb here, and it had just as many figs. Actually, I think it had 6 figs on it, but it broke off because it was a graft that didn't take on both sides of the graft union. And so when I took off the rubber band and what was supporting it, it just fell off. Yeah, and that right there is just a flawed graft. So in the end, probably should have took it off anyway, and we grafted something new onto it. Well, we regrafted GM 149, and we also bud grafted it down here. But these are all different GM figs. You know, we have GM 125, GM 172, GM 25, and GM 149A. I also have GM 175, and I think there may be one other that I have, but they all seem to be very impressive varieties. So I'm excited. I'm glad that people have been preserving them to give me a chance to try it. This here is Albo. Albo is an Italian fig from a guy named Ciro in Italy. He's all over Facebook. I'm sure you guys have seen him. Albo is a fig that comes from his area of Italy, and it's very early there. It's the earliest fig that he grows. After that is Pastiglieri, and Pastiglieri is a very early fig. So if there's something earlier than Pastiglieri, it's probably early here. And the nice thing about this fig here, guys, Albo, is that it's a huge fig. It's a huge honey fig. So it has a lot of size, a lot of fig to it, and I'm sure it tastes great. Another huge honey fig that's quite early, Yellow Longneck. So we grafted this as well, right next to Albo. Two similar figs. We'll get to try Albo down here. But two similar figs, guys, on the same tree, at least in terms of like looks. They're not the same. I'm almost certain of that. But here we have early violet grafted, and we also have Negra de-age. I want to thank my friend Jamie for this graft, or for these cuttings so that I could graft it. She finds it to be very productive, quite early and tasty for this climate that we're in. This tree here, this is a nice Franken fig of different Pons varieties: Bordesat Rosa, Bordesat Negra Ramada, and Capulcurt Negra. So really cool what you can do with Franken figs. Here we have the good Dr. Gawadi. My friend Big Bill really raves about this one and says it's similar to White Triana and Canadria, which are two figs that I have and really enjoy. But he says it tastes better. It has a different consistency to it that he finds more favorable. So I'm very excited that my friend Craig gave me that tree this year, which was actually very small when he gave it to me, and now it's growing like wildfire. Yeah, it's growing like wildfire, guys. uh,